Hi friends, in this video we are going to study Stakeholder Management Plan Part 1. We will study about stakeholder engagements, project stakeholder management. We have all studied the 10 main knowledge areas of PMBOK. Project stakeholder management is one of those key knowledge areas. A project stakeholder management includes the process required to identify the people, groups, or organizations that could impact or be impacted by the project, to analyze stakeholder expectations that impact on the project, and to develop appropriate management strategies for effectively engaging stakeholders in project decisions and execution. The processes support the work of the project team to analyze stakeholder expectations, assess the degree to which they impact or are impacted by the project, and develop strategies to effectively engage these stakeholders in support of project decisions and the planning and execution of the work of the project. This brings us to the four main stakeholder management processes as defined by PMI. The first is to identify the stakeholders. Second is to plan the stakeholder engagement. Third is to manage the stakeholder engagement. And fourth is to monitor the stakeholders. The process of identifying project stakeholders regularly and analyzing and documenting the relevant information regarding their interest, involvement, interdependencies, influence, and potential impact on the project's success. We have studied in the last lecture how we must gauge the importance of a stakeholder by noting their power and their interest. Next is planned stakeholder engagement. This is the process of developing approaches to involve the project stakeholders based on their needs, expectation, interest, and potential impact on the project. Also, in the last lecture, we have studied the various levels of stakeholder management like involve, consult, collaborate, etc., to ensure optimum stakeholder engagement. Next is manage stakeholder engagement. This process of communicating and working with the stakeholders to meet their needs and expectations, address the issues, and foster appropriate stakeholder engagement involvement. This tells us that the entire project team must be involved in managing the stakeholders. They must actively listen to them, their expectations, and address these issues so that it does not become a hindrance to the project later. The fourth process is of monitoring the project stakeholder relationships, tailoring the strategies for engaging stakeholders through modification of engagement strategies and plans. The project manager is constantly responsible throughout the project life cycle to keep a keen eye on the stakeholder relationships and accordingly decide his future strategies, whether to continue the project or cancel it. Overview of the stakeholder management is shown here as inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs of each of these process groups. In identifying stakeholders, we find the project charter, business documents, project management plan, project documents, agreements, environmental factors, and the organizational process assets as the key requirements to start identifying the stakeholders. The output is the stakeholder register, the updated project management plan, and updates to all project documents. The tool and technique that was used to analyze these inputs was through expert judgment, through data gathering and analysis techniques, and meetings with all the key stakeholders. Next process is the planned stakeholder engagement, in which the inputs are from the previous process. The tools and techniques used to analyze this is expert judgment, again data gathering and analysis techniques, and mainly the decision making technique to finalize the output, that is the stakeholder engagement plan. Once the stakeholder engagement plan is freezed, we move on to the next process of managing the stakeholder engagement. Once again, similar tools and techniques of good communication skills, interpersonal and team skills, and meetings are used to properly engage the stakeholders time to time and note the output, which could be change request, updates to the project management plan, or project document updates. These updates further keep on getting involved in the last process group, that is monitor stakeholder engagement. Once again, similar tools and techniques are used, and at the end of this process, we get work performance information, final change request, project management plan updates, and project document updates. Coming to understand what stakeholder engagement actually means. In order to increase the chances of success of any project, the process of stakeholder identification engagement should commence as soon as possible. After the project charter has been approved, the project manager assigned and the team begins to form. This should be the primary focus. The broader definition of a stakeholder expand the traditional categories of employees, suppliers, shareholders, and includes groups such as regulatory bodies, lobbies, environmentalists, financial organizations, the media, and those who simply believe that they are stakeholders. They perceive that they will be affected by the project or work outcomes. Hence, the trends and the emerging practices for project stakeholder management include, but are not limited to, identifying the stakeholders, which is not a limited set as we have seen earlier. Ensure that all the team members are involved in the stakeholder engagement activities. Reviewing the stakeholder community regularly and often parallelly. Consulting with stakeholders who are most affected by the works or outcomes through the concept of co creation. This puts a greater emphasis on including these affected stakeholders as partners for decision making and ensure that the project moves in a proper direction. Thus, if you capture the value of these effective stakeholders, both positive and negative, it will highly benefit the project. Positive value can be based on the consideration of benefits derived from higher levels of active support from these stakeholders, whereas negative value is derived by measuring the true cost of not engaging these stakeholders effectively. This will lead to losses for the organization, or the project's reputation is at toss. Going into detail, the identifying stakeholders process, we can find the inputs, tools and techniques, and output listed clearly. Here we see that the inputs are the project charters, business documents, the project management plan, the project documents such as change log, issue logs, agreements, etc. The tools and techniques remain majorly the same through all the processes, that is expert judgment, data gathering and analysis techniques, data representations, and meetings. which includes the stakeholder mapping representation in the form of the power interest matrix. The output will be the stakeholder register, which lists down all the names of the stakeholders, its category, their needs and expectations, contact details, etc. Moving further to plan stakeholder engagement, it involves again the inputs from previous process as well as similar tools and techniques, while the output is stakeholder engagement plan. Next, the managed stakeholder engagement gives us change request, updated project management plan with respect to the communication management plan and the project document updates for changes log, issue log, lessons learned register, and stakeholder register in case there are any new stakeholders who are identified in the process or the needs and expectations of anyone has changed. Last is the monitor stakeholder engagement. The inputs to this from the previous processes are the project management plan, project documents, work performance data, organizational process assets, and the enterprise environmental factors. The tools and technique used here mainly is your communication skills in terms of giving feedback to the customers and the stakeholders by providing them presentations, supplying brochures, and informing them of your various plans and how the project will actually help them in the long run. Also, the team should have interpersonal skills like active listening, leadership, networking, political awareness, etc., to carefully monitor and manage the stakeholders. The outputs to this process will be the work performance information, any change request received, updates to project documents, stakeholder register, and updates to stakeholder engagement plan. Now we see how construction stakeholders can be managed effectively. After formal stakeholder analysis is done, you classify them as primary or internal or secondary or external stakeholders. The needs and expectations of these are listed for each type. Further, the strategies are formed in line to their needs and expectations. The tactics like tools and techniques used are listed in the next block, whereas tips how to manage these stakeholders is given in the last block. Some of the tips for formalizing stakeholder analysis is not to exclude any stakeholder in the initial phase. For strengthening stakeholder relationship, you must ensure there is a proactive relationship development with clear communication plan and channel. Mutual respect and trust with secondary players is crucial. To sustain stakeholder commitment for internal stakeholders, there should be an active response to their requirements. Whereas for external, you need a proper feedback system, which will be very helpful. And last, to increase stakeholder satisfaction for internal stakeholders, satisfying one stakeholder might at times make others dissatisfied, that is, through means of promotions or rewards. However, for external stakeholder satisfaction, involvement programs at appropriate levels should be carried out throughout the project life cycle. This brings us to the lecture summary. Project stakeholder management includes the processes required to identify the people and the groups or organization who are impacted or can significantly impact the project and to analyze their expectations, the quantum of the impact, and then to develop appropriate management strategies to effectively engage these stakeholders in the project decisions and execution. We have studied the practices for project stakeholder management, which include but not limited to identifying the stakeholders, ensuring that all team members of a project are involved in engaging them, reviewing the stakeholder community time to time, consulting with them in a proper way, communicating using interpersonal skills, team skills, and get to know if who is most affected. Once that is known, you must take them their opinions to determine the further outcome of the project. Also capturing the value of effective stakeholder engagement, both positive and negative, will help the organizational learnings. And last but not the least, we studied again the four main management processes: identify stakeholders, plan the stakeholder engagement, manage stakeholder engagement, and to monitor the stakeholder engagement. Thank you.